Hello. If you want to support us here at The Contemporary Gentleman, you can buy into our Spy series, links below. And depending on when this was recorded, we may or may not have an Instagram and or Patreon. If we do, links are below. Cheers. Hello everyone, James Donaldson here, and I'm bringing you a video, kind of the update for my combat handgun evaluation thing that I'm doing. So this one being on the Sig P220 versus the Sig P227. For more information, stay tuned. So as I said in this video, I am comparing specifically the Sig P227 versus the Sig P220. Now, as I explained in my video, if you haven't seen it, maybe go back and watch that to see all the guns I'm looking at. 9 different guns. I realized that even if I was able to get the resources for range day and check them out all at once, resource including time, which is next to impossible, it would just be hard to go through 9 guns and just pick. So what I've done is bracket them, started with guns that are similar to each other, figure out which one edges out the other, and then as I progress through this kind of bracket, I have 2 kind of things coming to where then they'll meet, and then they're going to start facing guns that are more different, and that's when really things are going to show of like, okay, well, a Sig is very different than a Glock. Sig in terms of the, double single decocker Sig versus the blocky Glock that's double action striker fired only. So, this is Sig v Sig. Let's check it out. So getting in the meat and potatoes, let's start with the 220. So it is an 8-round, 45 caliber handgun. This one was able to get threaded. It came out right around the same time as the 226, or at least close enough to it that when Glock won the contract for the Austrian military, a couple of the guns it was going against was the 226 and 220. It's very similar. For being a 45, I guess the 226 is probably more double stack with its 9mm. It's pretty much single stack, but it feels very much like a 226. And honestly, the reason I chose a lot of these guns is I specifically like each one of these in this program we're doing. So I just like the look of the 226, and I'm familiar with it. It was one of those guns before I owned any guns that I would rent a lot. I just like it. The functionality, the its appearance in media and movies over the years. It's just a cool gun. And so where I don't necessarily need or want one in 9mm to have basically the same gun in 45, kind of makes a little more sense. So that's my interest in it, subjective interest in it. And outside of that, it is a formidable combat handgun. There's no kidding about that. It's for sure thing. So, hence its entry into the test. Now, there is an available 10-round magazine. It looks super goofy. But, that's it. So, going from there, when I was originally interested in, gosh, if I wanted a 45 caliber handgun, what would I get? And I was looking at the 220, and then eventually I discovered the 227. And at first I had no idea what the difference was, because they look pretty much the same, but it is fatter, because it holds 10 rounds standard. The flush magazine, 10 rounds. So, that's pretty cool. Everything else is pretty much the same. Now, this was only produced from 2013 to 2019. The reason it was discontinued is because sales had dropped off paling in comparison to the 220. And that's pretty much it. Now, it was adopted by state police in Indiana, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Delaware. And in 2024, Pennsylvania went and left this and went to the Walther PDP. Just an interesting fact. Now, main differences, the capacity and therefore the dimension. The 220 is thinner, 227 fatter, 227 holds 2 more rounds. Now I thought that would be kind of a big thing to go with the 227. So obviously dimensions are different, but not just the dimensions in the grip, but just kind of it's weird when you really start to nitpick the little details. Not that they matter at all on the range, because they don't, but just like the slide releases are slightly different, and the decockers, the decocker on the 227 is slightly smaller, which is weird because this, not as easy to hit as the one on the 220 because this is thinner. Just kind of interesting. So I'd be curious to ask engineers kind of what all went into that. You would think they could or would use more similar little details, but they didn't. So, without having talked to an engineer, can't comment on that anymore. Now on paper is a good comparison when you're getting a general feel for guns, or at least learning about the concepts. Now, I'm not even going to say you should ever make a purchase based on paper, but it's a good place to start. If you can ever get your hands on a gun to try it out, I really recommend that before spending money on it, even if you just get a couple hundred rounds through it, to at least get some kind of idea of what you're looking at. It's kind of like a meet your heroes thing. Sometimes people meet their heroes and they're like, wow, this dude is so cool. And then other times they meet their heroes and they're like, that guy is an asshole. So, looking at these on paper, I really was like, the 227 seems like a great way to go. Holds 2 more rounds, they're flush. Now there are available extended magazines for the 227 that hold 14 rounds. I did hear about reliability issues, but I can't attest to them because I don't have those magazines. So, anyway. Now handling them. So I've had them, I keep most of them at work. I actually handle them like in between emails, and we're very Pro 2A, so other people check them out. We'll kind of regrip them, and guys will be like, well, I really like that one. So anyway, I really like the feel of the 227. Just how big it is, and just how my grip feels and everything. But here's the important thing. On paper, handling it in the store, or at your desk, at your work, or wherever, home, nothing will ever be as good of a tell as the range. Firing live ammunition. So I'm getting to a point with all this. So ergonomics, grip control, balance, they're both pretty good. I thought handling them that the 227 would be better. I thought the width would kind of spread out the surface area for the force and my hand gripping it and controlling it. Also, I'm pretty used to bigger grips. I shoot Glocks, to include the big cartridge ones like the 20. So, not foreign to that. Getting into the function, the integration, the 220 is going to win because the support's just going to be better. So, getting down to function, the 220 is going to win. It's still supported, all that, and it was in production way before the 227, and is obviously continued to be in production. Single action, both triggers are great. For the little nuances you have, the triggers are pretty much the same, and both the doubles and the singles are both pretty smooth. I really do like the triggers on these guns. This whole evaluation isn't just going to be based on one factor or the other. One of the bigger factors is how each gun operates suppressed, and there's a variety of categories that I'm going to be looking into, but trigger is an important one, very important one, and I really just, I like having the decocker because firing at the range, I was able to do some decocking, and I will say something I didn't know until handling these guns is it's actually really easy to hit the decocker with your left thumb if you want to hit it for whatever reason. For instance, you're at the range and you're practicing double action. So, triggers, great, love them both. Now getting into the caveats and variables. Unsuppressed, both ran great. However, the P220 proved to be the easier one to handle, and basically it just went back on target better after the recoil cycle was over. So basically, gun would cycle, and then it was back on. And, I can't fully explain that, but out of my 2 range sessions, the first one I started the 227, then went to the 220, back to the 227, or no, I went the other way around. 220 first, 227 second, 220 suppressed, 227 suppressed. I did kind of notice that the 227 was a little harder to handle, and it just wasn't as smooth getting back on target. And I don't think it's because it's got different sights. I think it's got to do with the fatness, and maybe it just doesn't fully seat in my grip as well as the 220 does. And so then second range trip, I started the 227, put about 150 to 200 rounds through it, and then went to the 220, and it was the same thing. So I was kind of trying to reprogram myself to the 227, and it didn't work, basically. So I would say that pretty well proves things. Now, I didn't get any shot timer work on camera, but I did try a shot timer. My groups are a little better at the 220, probably because I was just getting back on, and my speed was definitely better at the 220. So anyway, so that's kind of the interesting thing. And so now both suffered from my grip holding the magazine release, catch, whatever you want to call it, stop, down many times. The first outing, I think maybe I was a little more aware of it and trying to avoid it, which you shouldn't really compromise your grip for something like that. So I was like, oh gosh, is it the magazine? Am I just doing it with the 10-round magazine causing problems, whatever? So I paid way better attention on the second outing, and it was totally my grip. I mean, no question. So there we have it. Now, with gloves, the decockers are a little harder to manipulate. The hammers not so much, and the triggers are still pretty easy to use. It wasn't any harder than any other gun when you add gloves to the combination. Now suppressed. Both ran well suppressed, and they did throw an immense amount of shit back into my face. A lot, to where originally I was going to put 100 rounds. Each gun's going to have an initial set of rounds. Each gun is going to have, for its first match, 200 rounds, and then 50 rounds suppressed. So 250 rounds, and obviously some of these guns accumulate more as they get compared to other guns. And that's just basically with these, I found that that's kind of a good sweet spot. Money is kind of why I didn't push it to 500, which I originally kind of wanted to do, but I really do feel like I've gotten a good feel for these guns. And so my point is that, getting back to it, I didn't even shoot the rest of the 50 rounds. Now, they all kind of had already extra rounds from the initial film day where I just was running rounds for them. And so, for the overall round count, these are still hitting over 250, regardless that I bailed on the suppressed rounds. Now, I ordered specific ammo, supposed to be better suppressed, which is the Federal Syntech, and at least for these, no difference. It's possibly worse because I don't remember it being that bad the first time that I shot these suppressed. So anyway, from a functioning standpoint, great, but they were just so bad to shoot suppressed. I was wearing iPro, so it made it, as I was firing, I was like, I kind of wish I had like the paintball mask, because then I'd probably be good. So moving on from there, for the 228 rounder, ran flawlessly, as did the 10 rounder. No real issues. The only issues I really ran into with these guns at all was my thumb holding the slide release down. So, anyway, the close. For me, the 220 is the winner, which is not what I thought would happen. This evaluation, and I'm sure the rest will be as well, is a great example as to why you can't make important decisions about guns only on paper. You have to get them to the range and test them. I believe the girth of 227 is just a hair too much. While one could train around it, one cannot say how many rounds that would take. Plus, while you'd be using rounds to square away simple grip issues on the 227, those rounds applied to the 220 would go to more intermediate skill sharpening versus spending extra time on basics. As myself, as a shooter, I would choose the 220 over the 227. If I were getting into this for a force, like a police force or military force, I would also get the 220, as more time can be put into those intermediary skill sharpening versus the basics, as I said before. Furthermore, if you are on a force, some of your members might have smaller hands, which won't be as compatible with the 227. For a collector's standpoint, or from a collector's standpoint, the 227 is what I would choose. It's just more rare, and this example in particular has an exquisite color scheme to it that I really kind of like. In the end, however, the P220 is the winner here for me, and will be the one to go on to face the next competitor. With that said, I will be surprised to see if it does beat the 1911, as my aggressive grip on the gun prevents the slide stop from functioning properly, giving other guns, such as its next competitor, the 1911, an edge over this one, as that is a very important part of an evaluation. I need the gun to do all its functions correctly, and so if my grip isn't compatible with this gun, it's going to be an issue for it. So, this has been James Donaldson with the Contemporary Gentleman, and until next time, keep your composure.